A Century in Newmarket, a story of family and community. Chapter 1, The Roaring Twenties. Narrator: in the 1920s, Newmarket, New Hampshire, was a small, bustling mill town nestled along the banks of the Lamprey River. The town's identity was closely tied to the Newmarket Manufacturing Company, a sprawling textile mill complex that dominated the local economy. It was a time of prosperity and change, with the echoes of the Great War still fresh in people's minds and the Jazz Age in full swing. The Johnson family had called Newmarket home for generations. Samuel Johnson, a former soldier who had fought in World War I, returned to his hometown after the war. He found work at the mill, just like his father and grandfather before him. Samuel married Emily, a school teacher from the nearby town of Exeter. They bought a modest home on Main Street where they would raise their children, Alice and Henry. Life in Newmarket during the 1920s was a blend of old traditions and new freedoms. The town square was the heart of the community, where people gathered for dances, town meetings, and 4th of July celebrations. The Johnsons were a well-respected family, known for their hard work and involvement in local affairs. Emily, with her background in education, often organized reading groups for the town's children, fostering a love of literature and learning. As the decade progressed, the town began to feel the effects of Prohibition. While the law was meant to curb the consumption of alcohol, it led to an increase in bootlegging and speakeasies. Newmarket was no exception. The Lamprey River became a popular route for smugglers, and rumors of hidden stills in the nearby woods circulated among the townspeople. Samuel, though a law-abiding man, found himself occasionally turning a blind eye to these activities, understanding that people were just trying to make ends meet. Chapter 2, The Great Depression and World War II. Narrator: the 1930s brought hard times to Newmarket. As the Great Depression swept across the nation, the once thriving mills struggled to stay afloat, and many families faced financial hardship. The Johnsons were no exception. Samuel's hours at the mill were cut, and Emily took on extra work tutoring children to make ends meet. Despite the challenges, the family remained close-knit, finding solace in each other and their community. As the decade wore on, the shadow of war loomed once again. Henry, who had grown up hearing stories of his father's bravery in World War I, felt a deep sense of duty. When the United States entered World War II, he enlisted in the Marines. His departure left a void in the Johnson household. But Samuel and Emily were proud of their son's service. During the war, Newmarket, like many small towns across America, experienced a surge of patriotism. The mills, which had been struggling, were revitalized by war contracts, producing uniforms and other supplies for the troops. Women, including Alice, stepped into roles traditionally held by men, working in the mills and volunteering for war efforts. The town came together to support the soldiers, holding bond drives and collecting scrap metal. The war ended in 1945, and Henry returned home as a decorated Marine. The town celebrated his homecoming with a parade down Main Street, and the Johnsons were relieved to have their family reunited. The post-war years brought a period of growth and optimism. The GI Bill allowed veterans like Henry to pursue higher education, and he went on to study engineering at the University of New Hampshire. Alice, inspired by her mother's example, became a teacher. Chapter 3, The 1950s and 1960s, A Time of Change. Narrator: The 1950s ushered in a period of prosperity for Newmarket. The town's population grew, and new businesses opened along Main Street. The Johnson family continued to be active in the community. Samuel and Emily were proud grandparents by this time, doting on Alice's children, Sarah and Michael. Henry, who had married a nurse named Margaret, moved to Boston for work but visited often. Despite the post-war boom, Newmarket was not immune to the social changes sweeping the country. The Civil Rights Movement and the Vietnam War sparked heated debates in the town. The younger generation, including Sarah and Michael, were eager to engage in discussions about these issues. Sarah, inspired by the activism of the time, joined the Peace Corps after college, traveling to Africa to work on development projects. Meanwhile, the mills that had once been the lifeblood of Newmarket were facing decline. Advances in technology and the rise of foreign competition made it difficult for the mills to compete. By the late 1960s, many of the town's factories had closed, leaving a void in the local economy. The town faced the challenge of redefining itself in a changing world. Chapter 4: The 1970s and 1980s, A New Identity. Narrator: The 1970s were a time of transition for Newmarket. The town struggled with the loss of its industrial base, but there was also a sense of opportunity. The old mill buildings, once symbols of economic vitality, were now vacant. However, a new generation of entrepreneurs saw potential in these spaces. The historic mill buildings were repurposed into apartments, offices, and artist studios, attracting a new wave of residents and businesses. The Johnson family adapted to the changing times. Samuel passed away in the early 1970s, and Emily, now in her 80s, moved in with Alice and her family. Henry and Margaret continued to visit often, bringing their children, David and Laura, who were fascinated by the stories of Newmarket's past. In the 1980s, Newmarket began to develop a reputation as a hub for the arts and culture. The old mills, with their spacious lofts and high ceilings, became home to a vibrant community of artists, musicians, and writers. The town's rich history and scenic location along the Lamprey River made it an attractive place to live and visit. The Johnsons were proud to see their town thrive in new ways. Chapter 5: The 1990s and 2000s, Growth and Transformation. Narrator: The 1990s brought continued growth and change to Newmarket. The town's population increased as people from surrounding areas moved in, drawn by the town's historic charm and burgeoning arts scene. The Johnson family expanded as well. Sarah returned from her work abroad and settled in Newmarket, where she started a nonprofit organization focused on community development. Michael became a history professor at the University of New Hampshire, sharing his passion for the town's rich past with his students. As the new millennium dawned, Newmarket continued to evolve. The town invested in infrastructure improvements, revitalizing Main Street and preserving its historic buildings. The old mills, once a symbol of decline, were now a source of pride. The town embraced its identity as a cultural and historical destination, hosting festivals, art exhibits, and historical tours. The Johnsons remained active in the community. Alice and Henry, now retired, enjoyed volunteering at the local historical society, sharing stories of Newmarket's past with visitors. Emily, who had lived through nearly a century of change, passed away peacefully in her sleep in 2005, leaving behind a legacy of kindness and service. Chapter 6. The 2010s to present, a community united. Narrator. The 2010s were a time of reflection and renewal for Newmarket. The town faced new challenges, including the impact of the opioid crisis and the effects of climate change. However, the community remained resilient. The town's leaders worked to address these issues, focusing on public health and sustainability initiatives. The Johnson family continued to be a cornerstone of the community. Sarah's nonprofit grew, providing support to families in need and fostering a sense of unity among the town's residents. Michael, who had become a respected historian, wrote a book about Newmarket's history, chronicling the town's journey from a mill town to a vibrant cultural center. As the years passed, the town embraced new technologies and industries. The old mill buildings, once again repurposed, became home to tech startups and co-working spaces. The town's schools, parks, and public spaces
It's gone now. There, look.
Look there.
See the car, the flags?
Yeah, well, that was because we were in transition.
That's 12 times the size of Los Angeles.
Is it?
12 keeping up.
Yeah, what are you guys?
Watch.
We used to march here in St. Thomas. Hey, there's Erica.